Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at a deeply personal story, a really raw account shared by one of our listeners. It traces a relationship with their mother across, what, 66 years?
That's right, a lifetime, practically.
And the author describes this connection that was, well, for decades, normal, sweet, kind, and loving. Someone who always had their back.
A really positive start, it sounds like.
But then, according to their account, everything shifts. They seem to pinpoint some significant losses, things that happen later in life, as potential triggers.
Right, and this is where it gets complex. These triggers, the author suggests, led to what they describe as narcissistic abuse emerging. And it just profoundly changed the whole family dynamic.
What's really interesting here, from my perspective, is how this personal narrative looks at these significant behavioral changes,
Yeah.
suggesting they were triggered later in life by specific traumatic events.
Yeah, rather than stemming only from early development, which, is often the main focus in more clinical discussions around personality disorders. This story focuses on that later trigger.
Exactly. And that's our source for this deep dive, this single firsthand narrative. It's titled, Much Love to My Narcissistic Mom. It's really the author's own chronology, their attempt to make sense of decades of, well, challenging interactions and observations within their family.
So we're really stepping into their perspective, aren't we? It's their story exactly as they experienced it and wrote it down. It's not, a clinical evaluation.
Not at all. It's a child's deeply personal record of their relationship with their mother over a very long time.
Okay.
And our mission in this deep dive is really just to walk through this specific timeline the author provided. We're going to explore the sequence of events they describe, the changes they witnessed.
The ripple effect on the family.
Right. And the author's own difficult journey grappling with it all. And crucially, we're sticking strictly to the details they provided in their account.
Got it.
So this deep dive is really custom tailored for you, the listener, taking a close look at this specific story. We want to find insights into that potential intersection of life events, perceived personality changes, and family dynamics, but all seen through the eyes of this one author.
Okay, so let's start where the author does then. The early years.
Yeah.
For the first, 44 years of their relationship, the author describes their mother in really positive terms: normal, sweet, kind, loving, someone who's consistently supportive.
It sounds like a strong, positive foundation, at least from the author's point of view back then.
That's evident.
Right. And that description, those first 4 decades, it really sets the stage for the dramatic turning point the author identifies. It describes significant changes starting around the mother's age of 44. What happened then, according to the author?
Well, the author links this period to major traumatic losses, specifically losing 3 owned homes.
Wow.
Yeah. And as the author puts it, apparently also losing the author and their sister to religion, right when their mother felt she desperately needed them most.
So these are perceived as really profound losses happening relatively close together.
That's the picture painted, yes.
And the author seems to connect these external losses, the homes, the perceived emotional distance from her children, directly to triggering something much deeper within their mother.
Yes, exactly. In the author's narrative, these events are framed as triggering their mother's profound childhood fear and insecurity. It's the author's own hypothesis, it seems, that these later life traumas kind of woke up something rooted much earlier.
So it's the author's way of understanding how maybe past vulnerability could have been reactivated by present crises. That seems like a plausible framework someone might develop, trying to make sense of confusing changes.
Exactly. That's their interpretation presented in the story. The author's chronology then points to another significant stressor, maybe 5 years later.
Yeah, this is when the mother is around 49. The author recounts her being all alone and taking on the care of their sister's first baby girl, Nicole.
Okay.
The author describes this as a tough time for the family, but especially for mom, and notes their perception of apparently no support from the grown children who had, in their words, left the crib.
Right. So that paints a picture of maybe increasing isolation and significant caregiving responsibilities layered onto those earlier losses.
It adds another dimension, doesn't it, to the author's view of the pressures their mother was under. And it's specifically this period, following the initial losses at 44 and then this experience at 49, that the author actually states is where, why, or how mom's narcissistic abuse was born.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It really is. pinning the emergence of these behaviors to a specific time and circumstance, at least in their narrative.
It's a very direct link the author is making in their story. They're identifying a precise point when they felt the dynamic just fundamentally changed.
So what kind of behaviors did the author describe seeing after this point?
Well, it's a long list, unfortunately. The author details their mother becoming defensive, paranoid, combative,
Attacking, lying, manipulative, controlling, demanding.
and someone who was, quote, fighting with everyone and anyone. It sounds like major shifts from that loving mother described earlier.
Definitely. And this dramatic change in behavior clearly had a devastating impact on the family system. How did the author describe the family's response to all this?
Well, the author states their family didn't know how to handle it or help with what they were experiencing because, they say, they had not learned about narcissistic personality disorder.
Ah, okay. So in the author's view, it was this lack of a specific framework or maybe understanding that led to a difficult outcome.
Yeah, the author says everyone in the family, including grandchildren, eventually just escaped, ran away, and abandoned her.
Which is incredibly sad when you think about it. The author's account seems to highlight this painful cycle, right? Perceived abandonment potentially contributes to the mother's difficult behaviors, which in turn leads the family to feel they have to distance themselves, potentially reinforcing the mother's sense of being alone.
It's a tough dynamic, and the author notes the severe toll this took, even mentioning that Nicole, the granddaughter the mother cared for at 49, ended up visiting a crazy hospital from a nervous breakdown.
Wow. That really highlights the intensity of the environment as described by the author.
Yeah. But despite this sort of family-wide withdrawal, the author states they were the only person who stayed closer.
Even though they felt overwhelmed by the situation.
Right, which speaks to the complexity of these bonds, doesn't it? Even when they're incredibly challenging.
And this closeness led to a period of actually living together that the author describes as particularly intense.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yes, the author recounts living with their mother from 2023 to 2025. They describe constant, horrific fighting, verbal abuse, the mother involving the police frequently,
Oh, my.
conflicts with neighbors, landlords, social workers, and constant elderly abuse reports being filed against the mother.
So accusations against the mother.
Yes. And during this time, the author repeatedly asked for help from family, but says there was no response.
That sounds absolutely relentless, just exhausting. It's no wonder the author describes the personal toll.
They state their nervous system became a war zone wreck, and they were genuinely concerned about developing PTSD.
Yeah.
It really illustrates the deep impact that living in that kind of environment, as the author describes it, can have on a person.
And they took steps for self-preservation, right? Mentioning taking nerve healing supplements and entering therapy.
Yeah, actions taken just to cope with that immense strain.
Understandable.
They also took a really significant step, one that sounds like it grew directly out of their experience.
Yeah.
Founding the website 247empowerment.me.
Ah, okay.
The author states this was for their survival, well-being, and for others in similar situations.
It seems like a move from just enduring the pain to trying to create a resource for themselves and others. That's a powerful way to channel such a difficult experience. But despite this really long history and that intense recent period, the author makes a crucial point about their understanding of the situation.
This detail really stood out to me too. The author states they had zero knowledge about narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, until just a few days ago.
Think about that for a second. Decades of this challenging dynamic, the triggers the author identified, the behaviors described, the family's response, the author's own struggle.
Yeah.
All of that occurred without the author having this specific label or framework of NPD to understand what was happening until very, very recently.
So the author basically applied this understanding after enduring the bulk of the experience, using it like a lens to look back and try to make sense of it all.
Exactly. And the decision to seek that understanding came after things really reached a breaking point during that period of living together.
Yes, the author describes the situation becoming, quote, batshit crazy out of control, coupled with those repeated unanswered pleas for family help.
And this led to the difficult decision to put their mother in an elderly home, specifically to stop the impasse they felt they were experiencing.
The decision born out of desperation, it sounds like, from the author's perspective.
And it was after making this painful choice and getting some space that the author finally had enough me time to investigate where, why, or how narcissism starts and comes from.
leading to that very recent discovery of information about NPD.
Yeah, which just reinforces that the labeling, the attempt to understand through the lens of NPD, was a really recent development in their very long journey.
Okay, so where are things now? Currently, the author notes that their small family is taking sides against each other on how to deal with the mother.
So the division continues.
It highlights the ongoing division that this long-standing situation has caused. Yeah.
And the author has a plan.
Yeah, the author plans to send this detailed chronology that they wrote to their family, ASAP. The hope is to help them understand and maybe stop any side effects of the narcissistic abuse they may have experienced.
So it's an effort to share their newfound understanding and perhaps offer a different perspective to other family members, trying to bridge that gap, maybe.
Could be. And there's a really poignant note of regret from the author, too. A wish they had known about NPD decades ago. They believe if they had, their mother and the family could have received specific help and made specific changes way back when the changes began 44 years ago and even now.
That really underscores the author's belief, doesn't it? That understanding and maybe targeted intervention might have altered the trajectory of decades of family struggle and pain.
It seems so. Now, there's a new development in the author's account that offers maybe a glimpse of a different path.
Ah,
Their mother's favorite great-grandson finally got involved and took her into his new home with his new family.
okay, a different setting entirely.
Exactly. And the author describes this new living situation in quite hopeful terms. Safer and happier, a neutral, brand new environment.
And they highlight a crucial difference, right, about the people there.
Yes, that the people there are those the mother does not hate, nor that she holds resentment towards, nor were victimized by her, and holds zero animosity.
That lack of shared traumatic history, that seems incredibly significant in the author's eyes, potentially creating space for a different dynamic altogether.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the author is actively supporting this move. They've compiled and sent the great-grandson all pertinent data to access her benefits like IHSS, SSI, elder services, etc.
So they're clearly hoping for success in this new environment and helping facilitate the practical side of things.
Yeah. And the author shares their hopes for the future in this new home. They hope her mother will become a loving grandmother figure, receive the love and respect she deserves, and that the great-grandson will actually learn about NPD and help in her recovery. It's a very hopeful outlook, maybe colored by the author's recent understanding and just the possibility of a fresh start, unburdened by all that past trauma.
It makes sense. And the author also articulates really complex emotions about their mother, doesn't she?
Oh, absolutely. They state, "I love my mother. I've always loved my mother, yet I also hated her." Specifically for, quote, violating the family and me.
But they immediately add that crucial context, right? That in their view, this wasn't because she was evil.
Right. But because none of us knew about NPD and had any clue of how to help her.
That is such a powerful distinction the author makes in their narrative, separating the person from the perceived disorder and framing the hurtful behavior as a consequence of maybe unaddressed challenges rather than, malicious intent.
And the author reiterates their unique position, having been the closest family member throughout their 66 years of the mother's 86 years.
Which gives this account immense weight, doesn't it? Coming from someone who lived through so much of it so closely.
Definitely. The narrative summary kind of concludes with the author's final reflection. It's a profound sense of relief, almost, and gratitude that the great-grandson does not have the history that I, Nicole, and Jessica have with her.
Enabling him, in the author's words, to simply love her better than me and my screwed up, traumatized siblings ever could.
Wow.
That statement really underscores the immense burden that a long, difficult family history can place on relationships. And it highlights the author's hope that a new generation, free from that specific burden, might find a different, maybe less painful way to connect.
Yeah. And just to mention it again, the author shared the resource they founded, 247empowerment.me, as a place for help for others in similar situations, which, again, grew directly out of this whole long journey.
It's an incredibly personal story, and it vividly illustrates how perceived personality changes, especially those potentially triggered later in life, as the author describes, how they can unfold over decades and create these deep family challenges.
It really highlights the difficulty of finding understanding, setting boundaries when there are decades of history involved, and how complex and painful the search for some kind of resolution can be.
Exactly. This single raw account really brings to life the potential long-term impact of, life events, and the struggle to find a framework for understanding really challenging family dynamics.
It truly does.
Hmm.
So, what does this all mean? We've explored one person's deeply personal story, haven't we? Tracing the perceived transformation of a mother after trauma, detailing the decades of family struggle, the lack of understanding.
And the complex path towards finding some form of resolution and maybe a new dynamic in a completely different setting.
It's a narrative about the long, difficult journey of living through challenging family relationships and that search for meaning, understanding, and potential healing.
Yeah.
And here's maybe a provocative thought to leave you with, based on this powerful account. Consider the profound impact that, as described by the author, a lack of knowledge and resources about personality changes or mental health challenges had on this one family's trajectory over decades.
Mhm.
Now contrast that with the potential for different outcomes when a new generation, someone unburdened by the same history of trauma, enters the picture with a different perspective and maybe access to information the previous generation just didn't have when the changes first began.
Right.
How much does understanding a situation change our ability to navigate it? And how deeply does family history shape the possibilities for connection, for healing, and even simply, as the author hopes, for love?